So, welcome. A big shout out to Candace, who's the founder of Successfully Self-Employed, for making this possible. I'm so grateful to have this platform that you have offered me to speak on my quest. So, thank you so much for Candace. She does run a fantastic community, Successfully Self-Employed. So, if you are interested in joining this one, Sam has sent the link in the chat. So, feel free to reach out and join the community. We're going to get started with the session and just with a bit of an introduction to me. So, thank you for joining us. So, a little bit about me is that I am the founder of Ontologic and I'm a workflows and habits specialist. So, basically, I help people to bring the processes that are inside of their head into processes, documentations, and then we create workflows from this. And also, we build habits in order to implement this. I'm also the host of a podcast, Booking in Bottles. And also, I launched a goal setting and accountability program. And this basically leverages the tools and insights about building effective habits, setting realistic goals. So, for this session, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining. And every month, I give out 8 free email triage sessions. So, basically, this is again got to do with the habits and the workflows that I build for people. And the email triage workflow, basically, what this is, it helps people with context switching because context switching costs you from 9.5 up to 23 minutes. So, constantly switching between your email and tasks is costing you that much time. And that is why at the end of the day, that you have so much cognitive fatigue. You can't do things at the end of the day is because of context switching. So my email triage workflow is basically to help support that and to have dedicated windows to manage your email. And I've offered out 8 of those sessions. I'm going to send a link. We're going to send a link that's got a form to sign up for these. And that form's also going to include, because we're going to actually take this offline. And basically, we are going to have this, and I'm going to go through a worksheet to work through. So fantastic. I'm super, super excited. And that is what we're going to be doing today. And that is a little bit about this session. Sam's going to send that link for you to sign up. So again, thank you so much. Welcome everybody. It's so exciting to have you here. We are getting started with number 4 in our Interdependence series. So thank you so much for being here. Just a little bit about what we're going to be doing today is that we're going to be talking about what is interdependence, just a small recap on our previous sessions, and then also some brief context updates because I've been speaking to a lot of people about interdependence. And I just wanted to give you some updates. And then we're also going to speak about the topic today, which is the power of mindset for independent people. So we're going to speak about interdependence, but we're going to really navigate through independence today. And then finally, we are going to open up the discussion for a private session on Zoom. So everyone is welcome to come, but if you cannot make it, it's been such a pleasure to have you. So we're going to get started with interdependence. And basically, with interdependence, I've decided to explore this with a design thinking lens. So what this means is that design thinking in itself is a methodology of innovation. And I'm using design thinking because it's the one thing that comforts me with design thinking is that the first thing they say is that you cannot assume the outcome. So in my exploration to interdependence, I'm feeling at ease because of that. So we've been exploring interdependence in so many different ways. So if we look at what interdependence is, and we'll just give a brief overview of what this is, because people who have been joining these sessions have heard me speak about this over and over again. But basically, I read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, and he speaks about what we say is the maturity continuum. So this speaks about emotional maturity, but I'm going to give an example that's more relatable, and then we'll link back to that. Once we're born, we are dependent on our parents, and then we become independent. We start paying for our own bills, we start paying for our own petrol, and that's a big shock. That was for me. And we think that is where life kind of halts. And then the cycle continues again. We support those who are dependent on us, even if it is our parents or our children. And so the cycle goes on, and we think that's what the entire cycle is. But when in fact there's a final step that we're actually missing, and this is that interdependence that I am exploring. Because I am on a quest to explore what is interdependence and how can we leverage this effectively in the workplace. So that's what all of this is about, and this is the journey that we're on. So, as a recap from our previous sessions, we have had 3 sessions, and I'm going to go to this quite briefly. But basically, our first session was when I introduced interdependence, and we started speaking about this. And I elicited people to think of what this elicits in them. So, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are if you would like to participate here. We do have a lot to get through, but I'd love to hear what comes up when I'm starting to speak about interdependence. So basically, I'm just going to summarize our first 3 sessions and then we'll move on to this actual session. So the first session was about, as I mentioned, interdependence. I'm going to keep the participants anonymous, but if you were there, you are more than welcome to take credit for these fantastic ideas. So the first lady, because we had a ladies, this was all started in a Femme Founders Club and it was just ladies. And basically the first lady spoke about this as Ubuntu. So this is the South African term that means I am because we are. And that was a fantastic insight. Then another lady so bravely brought forward that she reflected on navigating past tendencies to people please and codependent tendencies. So in interdependence, we now understood that there's a codependency that we don't want to embrace. Independence requires a full cup and healthy boundaries. The next one was mentioning that interdependence can be like the systems in nature, about the harmony, how things work together, how the wind pollinates flowers. So this was a phenomenal insight. And again, I feel aligned with that so much because I'm always speaking about the mycelium network that sits at the bottom of the forest and it actually hijacks the highways of plants and it intercepts their communication. And what it can do is reallocate resources. So, really fantastic first session of interdependence and just exploring what it means. By leveraging design thinking, I then broke this down and I tried to understand what if we break down interdependence, what are the core components of this? And so I thought of communication. That is one of the things that connects us. So our first session with a host was with Najiba Adams, and she is a life coach and mentor, and from June will also be a radio host, which I'm so happy for her. Now, her session was a real mouthful, so I'm going to try and get through as much I can, but she really gave such value and insight about communication. But basically, is she spoke about communication as intent versus impact. So she asked this really powerful question that says, is communication about what you say or what the other person understands? So that's where you intend to send a message, but what the person receives is actually dependent on their environment. So it's not always going to be the same. Then she went on to active listening versus passive hearing. So, active listening is this practice of listening to absorb the information with the goal of trying to understand, and rather than simply waiting your turn, waiting to speak. Then she speaks about passive hearing. So, this in itself is the act of physically hearing sounds, words, without consciously processing them or responding to them. So the learnings and the lesson from this was that active listening is actually a muscle and it's something that you need to exercise. And she dismantled this truth about communication only being about how much you can speak. Then she goes on to speak about non-verbal energy. So this is basically how we read body languages and all of the non-verbal communication that forms part of communication. So overall, this was a phenomenal session with Najiba. Then in April, we had a phenomenal session again, and these have been really great. And I decided at this point that independence was a topic that we really need to spend a lot of time on. A lot of the time, we don't embrace people into a community as they are. Sometimes, maybe even in life, corporations are all about what can I get from you? Whereas now we're trying to focus on is how can I help you? And that is the purpose of this session that we did with Roxanne. So she spoke about letting go of limiting beliefs. So this was a really intimate session that she specially curated for us. And Roxanne Botman is a Korean confidence coach. She also is in design thinking, and she's a design thinking coach. She's also a people and culture consultant, and she's also the founder of Bold Beings Consulting and Coaching. So the session was very intimate and very private. So if you are interested in these kinds of sessions, she is really the expert in this area. And this was again similar to what we're doing today when it comes to mindset, but she's got so much more practical experience. For me, I've created this because number one, these have worked for me, but also because I've used my skills in creating workflows for us for mindset. So she's really a phenomenal person, and I would really recommend connecting with her. If you do sign up to get the workbook afterwards, I will be sending their information if you want to connect with them. And finally, I just had two context updates. So these are just two context updates because I speak to a lot of people about this. So the first one was it was a gentleman, and basically he was working for a corporation and they did social network analysis inside of companies and organizations. And basically, what they did is they built surveys that map out the different relationships or networks inside the organizations. And these include friendships, professional, and informational networks. So basically, what it uncovered is that there are informational bottlenecks, not just the founder being a bottleneck, but informational bottlenecks where information gets stuck and overly depends on a few nodes or people. So this means the takeaways in this is that we don't notice the networks in business and they're often unseen. And if you are able to map out these networks, you can actually use them with intentional for knowledge sharing. The second one was a lady I met at a cake event. We had picnics and cakes. It was lovely. And basically, she spoke about spiral dynamics. Now, I don't know much about this, but I've looked a little bit into it. And basically, it is widely used in leadership coaching for organizational design. And also, it's really good for conflict resolution because that helps to explain why people clash over values and how to communicate with people on their level. Now, in this, they speak about different levels to the spiral dynamics. Look, I don't know much about that, but what I wanted to speak about was this inspired me and also gave me insight more about this is a charity that I support. So basically, it's U-Turn. There we go. So basically, this is a charity and it's fantastic. And they offer, if you can buy one of these, and it gives you four vouchers. And basically, you can give these people one voucher is clothing, shower, meal, or a safe space. So it's 50 Rand for one of these vouchers. And U-Turn has successfully reintegrated homeless people into the world, and they have an 80% plus success rate. So that is incredible. I did not realize that is how good they are doing. And the reason I'm speaking about it is in their process, it's similar to spiral dynamics where they have P1, P2, P3. So they go through these different levels where they have social workers at P1 and then so on, and then they're integrated into these shops. So you can go into any of these shops, and if you buy any of the stuff at the charity shops, you're supporting them. If you buy these cards, you're supporting them, and then they can further on get integrated into society. So this sparked that within me to understand, maybe again, as I mentioned earlier, is when we create this new community of interdependence to accept people and embrace them, we want to help them to be independent. And those P2, P1s, that was really an inspiration for me. So that is everything about interdependence that I have right now. It has been a wonderful journey of exploration, and I know this journey will continue because there are so many different ways that we can actually think about this. But I am going to move on to our presentation and the reason why we are here today, and that is the power of mindset for independent people. And these are the 6 steps that you can take towards a new mindset. So before we get started, I really just wanted to say that this is something that is your way to pour the cup. It's not the final answer. The final answer is not 47 because mindset is only part of the human experience. And for example, if I was to give you a map of Johannesburg and you're in Cape Town, no matter how positive you're going to be, it's still going to be a map of Johannesburg. Maybe you think, oh, I don't need the map. Fine, when you have a positive outlook and embrace the moment. The map is still going to be one of Johannesburg. And that's why I say is there's many other factors that contribute towards the human experience and to contribute towards success. But this is just a new way to start with a fresh perspective. So we've got number 1 on the screen, which says deep observation. Now, basically what this is, I want you to take a anthropologist lens. So this is with a curious mind, very objective, with no judgment. We want to take inventory of what's going on in our lives. And so normally what happens is we breathe in, and it's the busy mind telling us what we need to do, what we need to be doing a million different things. And we breathe out. And this is to clear our minds. What we want to observe here is the patterns of behavior. What did you say you wanted to do versus what did you actually do? Feelings. So if you're struggling with observation and it's a too new concept, the age old how are you feeling is a great way to look inwards. So this is the different types of emotions that we can feel. Sometimes we default to happy and sad when there's so many other different types of emotion. So here's a list of emotions for you to see if any of these resonate with you while you're doing these deep observations. How have you felt this week, this month, looking for these patterns? Fantastic. So we're going to move on to step 2, ownership. Now, again, with the same curious mind, we're going to look at what am I responsible for? If we understand that there is an equal equation of input equals output, we're going to look at the things that I have committed to. What are my non-negotiables? What are the actions that I've done to lead me here? So basically this is made up of the circle of control. So what is not in control is things like the weather. So getting upset and focusing on that is really not going to help you. But environmental design is something that is going to help you. And what that is similar to my slogan for my company that says, what we design designs us back. It's the same for your environment and your circle of control. So this says, what I design in my environment designs my behavior. So an example of this, I'm going to refer to habits a lot. And this is, for example, if you want to start running, is leaving out your running gear on your table for you in the morning, ready for you. So that's what I mean by designing your environment to design your behavior, because we're removing points of friction. And that's what we're trying to understand with our circle of control. Then we want to accept what is outside of our circle of control. So anything that we are not able to control, like the weather, it's for us to release. Taking note of what I call the time commitments credit card statement, and this is a new concept, but bear with me. And how I see this is it's all the things that you have to do. So if we look at the essential non-negotiables, this is like dropping your kids off at school, going to the doctor, your chores, feeding yourself, all of these things that are non-negotiables. Then we look at the work commitments. What am I committing to work? Newsletters, email campaigns, different campaigns on LinkedIn. Personal commitments. So these are the ones that we want for ourselves, self-fulfillment, losing weight, making friends. And finally, as we realize in the beginning, communication. So communication is really an important one, and it's also important for you to realize how much time you are spending on communication. Fantastic. So let's look at step 3. We are so hard on ourselves, especially if you're a founder and you hold yourself to really high expectations. So, forgiveness is the first step of responsibility, and it's understanding that we are imperfect beings. So, how we do this is we embrace failure. If you, for example, with habits, we think that when we set goals, it's fun and it's going to be a fun ride. But the moment things get difficult or we miss a step, we pour out the whole cup. We spill a little bit of milk, but we pour out the whole cup. So basically, here is where if you're trying to learn the guitar, you understand you're going to be terrible the first time. And that's how we should embrace habits, is to embrace failure. We are going to be terrible. We're not going to get 100% success rate if we want to do something 5 days of the week. But it's important to embrace that. And it's to ask yourself, is forgiving myself really that bad if I'm going to keep trying and not give up? What if we start with a clean slate and allow myself to figure out? Because we're not just forgiving here, we have a next step. So start by forgiving yourself for allowing things to reach this point, for not living up to the idea you had in your head, for failing to stick to your words, and for leaving tasks unfinished. Forgiveness is the soil in which your new life will grow. So, if we allow ourselves to forgive ourselves, it's going to allow us to take steps forwards to break out of patterns that we keep repeating. So, the next step is the why. So, again, we've done this and we've explored with a curious mind, and now we can begin to understand why are these things happening without judgment through an objective lens. Why did this happen? Explore with a curious mind. What patterns do I repeat? I'm constantly talking about patterns because this is how we step outside of insanity. If we're doing the same things over and over again and expecting the same results, we need to figure out what is going on. What are my friction points, as we discussed, looking at your environment and seeing what makes habits easier? And now we're going to look at the reprogram. So, this in essence is the habit I want to leave you with that you can do for, I would recommend 2 months, but 2 weeks is perfectly okay. And this is how we move from a negative mindset into a positive one and how to look at things more positively. So, we're going to try and catch these thoughts as if we have a net because there are so many that are flying around. So, we're going to choose one. It's so important to be honest here because nobody else can hear you. So, basically, is what we do is we start with what is my current mindset? So that is the observation. What am I currently observing with myself? So, for example, my common one was always, I can't do this. Then you're going to say, is this 100% true? So the trick here is to always say no, and then you're going to give a reason why. So, for example, according to who? Why can't I do this? It's according to who? Then the next step, is this limiting me? So then the answer again, yes, if it is, and then the reason. So a lot of the time, these thoughts that we're reprogramming are going to be ones that are negative. They're the ones that normally our ego says, oh, I'm not thinking that. Here we really are stepping outside of ourselves and taking a look at our observations of ourselves as if we're looking from the outside. And then the last step is what is a different way to see this? And this is basically, it says, I am capable of doing this. I trust myself to make good choices. So this is ideal for you to do at the end of every day. Then finally, we have step 6, which is future self-thinking. So now that we have the foundations to start reprogramming the way that we think, we want to start thinking about our future self because this is what's going to help ingrain this as a habit and as a lifelong philosophy. So the first one speaks about your future self. So this is again what I mentioned about setting yourself up for success. I've recently been trying to drink a lot more water and get a lot more, change my diet. And what I do every evening is I put out a teacup with a green tea in it. I put out a cup with the green powder next to it. I put out a bottle of water. I put out a cup with lemon water in it. I set myself up for success. But that's not the only way that you can set yourself up for success for future self thinking. Another way is, for example, with your chores, and this is just one example, to look at doing chores right now as a gift for your future self. So that is if you're looking at this as I'm gifting myself a clean kitchen, I'm gifting myself a clean lounge because I deserve it. That leads to the past self. So the past self will then thank the version of you who showed up. So basically, this is where another habit that would be great, but this is after we've been doing our reprogram. And this is really good for positive reinforcements, as Pavlov said. And this is basically to thank yourself and to reinforce and to speak, to think of the exact behavior so that you're reinforcing that and continuing to do that. Finally, as we're closing off, it's the present self. So this is to pour into your own cup. What is it that you need to hear right now? I am enough. I am not lazy. The things that you need to hear is what I use post-it notes with and to help myself remember and ground myself in the moment. So if we're looking at the future self as in being good to our future self, our past self being grateful for our actions, and the present self, we can anchor ourselves with these post-it notes to say exactly what you need to hear. Sorry, there's an error with the image, but we'll just carry on. And this is the daily practice that I'm leaving you with, is to have the journal in the morning, and this is where you'll have your observations, and the trigger can be something like a morning coffee. So keep your journal close by to your coffee if you can, and have that as a trigger. When I have coffee, I'm going to journal. Evening gratitude, which is to thank yourself for the behaviors, is when you close your laptop and again, to simply do a simple point of showing gratitude. And that is everything for this LinkedIn Live. It's been a whirlwind. I know I've been talking quite fast, but I did have a lot to get through. So thank you so much for your time. I'm so grateful for everyone who's joined this LinkedIn Live. I hope that it has been of value to you. If you stick around, I'm actually going to go through the worksheet to work through with you, and we're going to have some engagement. So if you want to hop on over, we're going to transition this over onto Zoom. So basically is we're also going to have an open discussion, which I'd love to hear more from your side, but we are going to be hopping over to Zoom. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. But again, thank you again for everybody who joined me. Thank you, Candace, for making this possible for me to explore interdependence in the workspace. And I hope that the session was of value to you because this really changed my life around and these steps really did help me. So thank you so much. We are going to stop sharing and we're going to transition over into Zoom. So I'm going to just ask Sam if we to let me know once we have transitioned properly, and then I will start sharing my screen again. But yeah, it's really been such a pleasure to do this talk and to really have people invested in something like this. So thank you so much. I really appreciate this. I really hope that this has really given you some tools to practically change your mindset because, as I said, having a positive mindset is really going to change your life around. It's giving you more chances of success. It's all about probability. So the more chances you give yourself instead of giving up on something, a positive mindset can help you to have a better view and to actually take the chances that you wouldn't take. A lovely quote is chance favors the prepared mind. So a lot of things in life are up to chance, but if you're prepared, you're that much more likely to succeed. So thank you so much. I'm just going to check in with Sam just to see, are we officially on Zoom?
Yes, we are.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you so much, Sam. So I'm just going to share my screen again. Fantastic. Apologies. Welcome. Okay, so amazing. So now that we are here, this is basically the worksheet to work through that I'm going to go through. If you have a pen and paper, I'd love for you to get involved in this. You don't have to comment, but I'd love for you to work through this on your own pace. Be really honest with yourself. These are some deep questions. But if you have some questions that you want to ask or anything like that, please feel free. But this is really a journey for you to really understand. So let's have a look one. So now we're going to go back to this deep observation, and here are some questions that I want you to answer. So basically, again, in summary, what I spoke about was that we want to step outside of ourselves and the current situation and look objectively at this. So let's look at the first question, and I'll give you 1 minute per question to answer. So let's look at how do you feel and how have you been feeling this week or month. So really take that lens of yourself, step outside of it and look at how you're feeling. And I'm just going to give you a minute or so just to answer that one, and then we'll move on to the next one. Okay, fantastic. So looking at the next one, this one says, how would an observer describe your actions based on what you said you were going to do and or compared to what you actually did? So if I'm looking from the outside, last month you said you were going to do X, Y, and Z. So now I'm looking from the outside for someone who's looking at your behavior. Would you describe that behavior as aligned or is it not aligned? So let's look at that. I'll give you a minute to just answer these.
Simone, can I ask? Sorry, can I ask a
Yes,
question?
absolutely.
I just want to clarify. Would they describe my behavior aligned to how I was feeling, or how?
So the first one is feeling. That should just get a sense of your current mood. Just to give you
Mm-hmm.
some clarity of, oh my goodness, I was actually feeling frustrated on Monday and then really happy on Tuesday. The second one is now we're looking at in a different way. We want to look at our actions. So this is to take that lens of what are the actions that I'm doing? Are my actions aligned with what I said I was going to do? So for example, if you say to your
Okay.
friends, I'm going to see you this weekend, and then you don't see them on the weekend. So that's what I
Yeah.
mean is, are your actions aligned with what you're saying that you're going to do? Are your actions aligned with what you're thinking that you were going to do?
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. Amazing. So I'm going to move on to step two, and this one is ownership. So this one again is the equivalent of input versus output. So this means that if I didn't do the things I said I was going to do, I'm going to have the negative consequences. It's the cycle of consequence. I'm going to have an action, I'm going to do something good, or I'm going to do something bad. And either way, that cycle is going to come back within whatever time decides. That's when the cycle of consequence is going to happen. So, here, what we are going to talk about is to understand what are the things that are inside of my circle of control. So, this is a simple list of all the things that let's link this to what is something that you feel you need to work on. The circle of control is obviously a very broad topic, but for this one, we're looking at this in essence is a mindset workshop. So we're looking at the negative mindsets of these specific things. So this would be something that you are struggling with, or something that you think is outside of your circle of control. We're trying to get a new perspective on different things in life. So this one, we want to push ourselves to think into that. What is in the circle of my control? In a negative environment, in an environment where there are things outside of my circle of control. Because sometimes if we're led by emotions, we're not able to think objectively, especially in our lives. Fantastic. So I'm just going to give you a few more seconds on that question.
Can you scroll down a little bit on the page?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is what are the things outside of the circle of my control that I fixate on? So sometimes, for example, if we're comparing ourselves to someone, that's outside of our circle of control. If I'm constantly fixating on other people and saying, oh my goodness, I wish I was as successful as that person was, that is something outside of my control. So we're trying to push ourselves again into discomfort so that we can see what are the things that we are speaking about. We want to remove emotion from this. We want to be objective as we can to think about the things that we fixate on. I'll give you a few seconds to finish off this one. Fantastic. So now we're going to move on to step three, which is forgiveness. And again, forgiveness is an act of responsible. In the beginning, I spoke about the emotional maturity continuum, and it speaks about emotional maturity. And that says that I have the freedom to respond to my environment despite how I feel, even if I'm angry or sad. And to be able to forgive yourself is again a form of responsibility. And forgiving yourself, is it really that hard? The first question is a question I'd like to challenge you because this one really is because I think a lot of us hold ourselves to high standards. And it says, is forgiving myself really that bad if I'm going to keep trying and not give up? So, what I mean in this is if there's something that I keep making the same mistakes over and over again, is forgiving myself really a bad thing? So this is a kind of a question for you to explore about the thing that you keep making the mistake on. So it's your honest opinion, and you can say no if you want, but this is about being really honest with yourself and really trying to think in terms of outside of my current reality. I want to observe this as a viewer. Give you a couple more seconds on that one. And then we'll move on to the next question is what is the one thing that I am going to forgive myself on? So you can have as many things as you like, but I always just try and allow you to have at least just one thing. So what is something that you disappointed yourself in? What is something that you thought that you were going to do and you didn't do? One thing that you're going to forgive yourself for. Fantastic. So I just want to spend a bit of time on this forgiveness one because it really is important for us to let go of these things. And we're not just letting go. Like I said, there's a next step to this. But this part is really important because you want to allow yourself the grace and the freedom to be able to take the next steps and to understand with a non-judgmental lens on the next ones. So really try and breathe in the old ideas, these ideas that you're holding on to, and breathe out. And we're letting go of them. And I know that it's difficult. I know forgiveness is a very difficult thing. And that's why I just wanted to stop on this and just spend a little bit of time really immersing yourself and trying to forgive yourself. And once we have done that, and I'm not saying that you're going to magically forgive yourself in a couple of seconds, but we're gearing towards that. And in that is the next step is, and the reason why we're gearing towards forgiveness is because it allows a non-judgmental lens. When we are holding ourselves to these high standards, when we are being difficult, when we're being tough on ourselves, it's so hard to take out the emotion. You shouldn't have done this. Oh my gosh, like just, and it's just constant blame, judgment. And we're not able to then extract the reason why this is happening. We're just constantly being so hard on ourselves over and over again, expecting us to just fix it and man up. So, step four is the why after forgiveness, so that we can try to not judge ourselves, but also to not judge the people around us and blame the other people around us. So, in this, we're looking at why this happens. So, let's look at the first question, which says, why did things get to this point? And what is holding me back or a point of friction? So basically is these can be the same thing, these can be different, but basically is what happened? Why did this happen? Was it something outside of the circle of your control? Was it something inside your circle of control? But why did things get to this point? What is the actual what happened? What is the actual things that happened that led me here? I'll give you a few more seconds to answer this one. And then the next question is quite a difficult question. And this one says, why do I keep repeating the same pattern? Now, this is a really deep question because sometimes the reason why we repeat patterns is because we feel safe. There's a lot of reasons why we're repeating the pattern, and to figure that out takes a little bit more time than this, but I am challenging you and pushing you. So if you can get something out of this question, if you can extract a pattern of behavior, constantly waking up late, maybe missing deadlines, there's so many different patterns in yourself. It's really difficult to recognize them and then to understand the why. So if you are able to, fantastic, but don't be hard on yourself if you are not able to answer this question. So we are going to move on to the next question then. So this one is the next step. So this is step 5. So this is the reprogram. So now we're going to take a little bit more time with this one. So I'm just going to give you some context for when you're going to do this daily, if you do want to do this daily. This is really great when you're not feeling your best, when you really are getting inside of your head, sometimes even when you're getting blocked in tasks. It's really great for a positive mindset. So if we look at this, it's this snapshot. So you want to do this almost as fast as you possibly can to try and get that observation. Because as soon as you start thinking about it, you start telling yourself different stories. So it's this book, an incredible book called How Not Why, How Not Now. We are going to look at the first question, which says, what is the observation? So I'm going to give you 2 minutes per each of these questions and a little bit of time. But the first time you do this, it's not going to come as naturally and as fast, but the more you practice this, the better you will become. So, what is that observation that I'm telling myself? What is the negative belief that I am telling myself? What is the thought, as we spoke about earlier? We want to catch this like with a net, and we want to capture that thought and bring it into reality and sort it out. So, I'll just give you about a minute left. Thank you so much for sharing your observation. Let me get in here and share an observation about myself. Let me take a moment. I think an observation I definitely have for myself is I think this one is I'm lazy. I think that's a good one for me, is because in the search of interdependence, I'm trying to explore what if we spend our days intentionally. And in that exploration of intentional, I find myself thinking, what if I am lazy? So that was my observation. I'll go through this with you as well. So, is this view 100% true? So, the answer is always no. We are trying to reprogram negative thoughts. we're going to say, why is this view not true? So let's look at the thought of I'm lazy. Is this 100% true? No, because I work, I do the things I normally do. Just because I'm sitting with intention doesn't mean that I'm not doing, just because I'm not wanting to work every second of every day, and because I have intentional actions doesn't mean I'm lazy. Then the next, okay, sorry, I'll give you a little bit more time on that one. But just to find that reprogram. So for Candace, thank you for sharing. I think this one is a good way to try to, because you've said two things. So let's look at the boundaries. And let's say, for example, this is to reprogram, and I know you, so this is very personal. And it's, you do have occasions when you do set good boundaries. This is not an all-encompassing truth. This is only part of a truth. This is the small part of what it is to the ebb and flow of human existence. So, is this view 100% true? No, it's not 100% true. Absolutely not, because I know that you do have the capability to set good boundaries. Let's look at the next one is, does this limit me? So for me is, if I think that I'm lazy, I'm going to start acting lazy and just pour out the whole cup and then just not do anything and really step into that self-fulfilling prophecy. For Candace, I know that she's just stepped away. Poor boundaries is, this is a great one to say, does this limit you? Yes. If I'm telling myself I'm not good at setting boundaries, I'm going to step inside of, again, the self-fulfilling prophecy of just saying I'm never good at this and all-encompassing no. When in fact you do have you are able to do that. And then the final one is, what is a different way of looking at this? So for me is, it was I'm lazy. This is a better way to look at this is, I am not lazy, and I try to not say that part, but it's more about I am intentional with my actions. Therefore, I'm able to spend my time on what I like. Candace, I'd love to see if you had, I know I'm picking on you, but if you had a different way to think of this, I can also help you with that, which is, I am good at setting boundaries. I just need to practice it more frequently. But please, if you were going to say it, please do.
I think in terms of reframing it, I think I would like to reframe it in a way of, I need to practice setting boundaries so that I have a better idea of when they're being tested and when they're being pushed. I think sometimes I don't actually know until afterwards I reflect and I realize I was uncomfortable in the situation and was just forcing myself to mask through it, which is not being poor at boundaries, just masking, and that's a different problem potentially. So yeah, I think that would be my long-winded way of reframing.
Thank you so much. I was just pulling at dust. So I'm so glad that you made it your own one. And I'm glad that you're seeing it's this is a mindset. If you're constantly telling you're not good at yourself, you're not allowing yourself to practice. You're almost saying, I'm not good at it. And then you're throwing the guitar in the dustbin. So I love that you're speaking about this in terms of, let me practice more because I actually am capable of doing this so that I can then identify those ones. So thank you so much for sharing. So we're looking at the final step, which is future self thinking. So again, I spoke about this and I don't know if it was clear enough, but we speak of our future self as in the things that we set ourselves up for success. So we're going to do the things that are going to benefit us in the future. So that also could mean exercising. It can be so many different things. And then we look at the past self is once we have done that action, it no longer exists in the present moment, but moves into the past. So this is where we are going to thank ourselves. So once we have the clean room, the six pack of abs, we're going to thank ourselves for doing that because we want to reinforce that behavior. Pavlov's model of negative and positive reinforcement says that positive reinforcement works better. So we want to identify and be grateful for the behaviors in ourselves, thank ourselves for the gift that we have given ourselves. And this is where we lead to now is in the present moment. Post-it notes are what changed my life. So this is basically what I want you to step away with is based on all of this is what is something that I need to hear right now. So for example, for me is I would like to hear that I am not lazy and I will write that on a post-it note. So what is something that you need to hear right now? Fantastic. So we're going to finish off with the final question, which is more geared towards habits and changes in your life. And I've given you many options to help with this right now. So if you want to make this personal, you can. But what I would love for you to change in your environment or to commit to is to trying out the reprogram and just to do that every day. So that's not this entire process, it's just the reprogram of what is the observation and that those ones. But let's look at now what changes can I make in my environment to make my positive habits easier. So this is in terms of the things that are blocking you, the things that are limiting you. What is something I can make a change on today? So for example, it would be to have my journal next to my table, as I spoke about earlier, to have the glass of water ready for me in the morning to drink. What are some positive changes I can make in my life today to make sure that I am enforcing this? Just one is enough. Yay. Thank you for sharing that, Candace. I love that. I love your reframing that. That is exactly what we're talking about. Amazing. So that is everything from my side. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. That is this entire workshop. I hope that you found value in this. I hope that this at least helps you to reframe thoughts that you have to help you to make a positive change for yourself. I know that it's a lot of the things that I speak about are things that we've heard over and over again, but I really wanted to make it clear that if we're doing these things with intention and purpose, then it's okay. The most important one is to forgive yourself for making the same mistakes because that's how we stop making the same mistakes and move towards an objective view and an objective path forward. Thank you so much, Nicola. Thank you so much, Candace. Thank you for participating. It was really amazing. And thank you, Candace.
Thank you,
Yes, Candace,
Simone.
thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm so grateful for the session.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's everything from my side. If anyone has any questions, feel free to open up the floor, but this was the first time we're trying this. So thank you so much for participating all the way through, and I hope you enjoyed it. Have a lovely evening, have a lovely week, and a wonderful week with intention. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.